The night Kael's daughter disappeared, he made a decision that would alter the course of human history. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let me take you back to a time when humans were prey, not predators. When the darkness held terrors we can barely imagine today. When survival meant constant movement and staying in one place for more than a few nights was a death sentence. This is the story of the first fortress, the first time a human being looked at the world and said, "No more running." Part 1. The Wanderers. Kael's tribe had been walking for 3 moons, 27 people, including 8 children, moving endlessly across the grasslands like shadows fleeing the sun. They followed the herds, yes, but more importantly they fled from what followed them. The great cats hunted at night. The bear-wolves prowled at dawn. The hyena packs tracked them relentlessly, waiting for someone to fall behind, to stumble, to show weakness. Every member of Kael's tribe had lost someone. His own brother had been taken 2 seasons ago, dragged into the darkness, while they huddled around a pitiful fire that did nothing to keep the monsters at bay. "We should stop here," Kael said, pointing to a cluster of rocks near a stream. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of blood and copper. Old Mora shook her head, her weathered face grim. "The rocks won't protect us. Nothing protects us. We keep moving at first light." "The children are exhausted," Kael argued. His daughter Lyra, only 7 summers old, could barely keep her eyes open. Her small hand clutched his tightly, as it always did when darkness approached. "Exhausted children can walk," Mora replied coldly. "Dead children cannot." That night they made camp. They always made camp. They had no choice. Humans needed sleep, needed rest, needed to gather strength for another day of endless wandering. They built a fire, as they always did. They posted watchers, as they always did. They huddled together, weapons clutched in trembling hands, waiting for dawn. Kael couldn't sleep. He never could. Not since his brother's screams had echoed through that terrible night. He sat with his back against a rock, his stone axe across his lap, watching Lyra sleep. Her small chest rose and fell peacefully, her face innocent in the firelight. She trusted him to keep her safe. They all did. But how could he, when safety didn't exist, when every night might be your last, when the best strategy humanity had developed was to run, hide, and pray? The attack came just before midnight. It started with a sound, a low growl that made every hair on Kael's body stand upright. The watchers shouted. The fire flared as someone threw dried grass on it, desperate for more light. And then the bear-wolves were among them. 3 of them, massive creatures, half again as large as a man, with jaws that could crush bone and claws like curved daggers. They moved with terrifying intelligence, separating the tribe, driving them away from the fire into the darkness where their true advantage lay. Kael grabbed Lyra and ran. It was instinct. The same instinct that had kept humans alive for countless generations. Run, survive, live another day. But as he ran, clutching his daughter, hearing the screams of his people behind him, something inside Kael broke. Or perhaps it awakened. He stopped running. Lyra was crying, pulling at his arm, begging him to keep moving. Behind them the sounds of slaughter continued. In front of them darkness stretched endlessly, offering the same fate that awaited them tomorrow, or the next day, or the day after that. "No more?" Kael whispered. He turned around. Part 2. The Vision. What Kael saw when he returned to the camp would haunt him forever, but it would also inspire him. 2 people were dead. 5 more were injured. The bear-wolves had vanished back into the night, satisfied with their kill, their hunger temporarily sated. Old Mora was binding wounds, her hands steady despite everything. She looked up as Kael approached, carrying Lyra. "You came back," she said, surprise evident in her voice. "We can't keep living like this," Kael replied. "We live how we can. There is no other way." "There has to be," Mora laughed bitterly. "What would you have us do? Fight the bear-wolves? Challenge the great cats? We are weak. We are prey. This is our existence. But Kael wasn't listening. He was looking at the rocks where he'd wanted to make camp earlier. In the moonlight they formed a rough semicircle like protective arms reaching out. If they had been higher, if they had been complete. What if we didn't run? He said quietly. The entire tribe fell silent. Even the injured stopped their moaning. What if, Kael continued, his voice growing stronger, we made a place where they couldn't reach us? Where we controlled the entry? Where we chose when to fight and when to rest? Impossible, someone muttered. Madness, another agreed. But Lyra looked up at her father with eyes full of hope, and in that moment Kael knew he would try. He would try, or he would die trying, because he would not let his daughter grow up in a world of endless fear. Part 3. The work begins. The tribe argued for 3 days. Most wanted to keep moving. It was what they knew, what their parents had known, what their parents' parents had known. Stopping meant death. Everyone knew this. But Kael was persuasive. He pointed out that they were dying anyway. He reminded them of every person they'd lost, every child stolen in the night, every exhausted elder who had simply given up. He painted a picture of something different, a place to call home, where children could play without fear, where sleep wasn't a gamble with death. In the end, 12 people decided to stay with him. 15, including Lyra and himself, moved on with Mora, unwilling to risk everything on one man's mad dream. The parting was painful. Families split. Friendships ended. Mora looked at Kael with something like pity. When you die, she said, and you will die, remember that I warned you. When we succeed, Kael replied, and we will succeed, come find us. She laughed and walked away. Kael's 12 followers looked at him expectantly. They had trusted him enough to stay. Now he had to prove them right. He chose the location carefully. A small plateau, raised perhaps 20 feet above the surrounding grassland, with steep sides on 3 faces and a gentler slope on the 4th. A stream ran nearby, close enough for water but not so close that predators could use it for concealed approach. Rocky outcrops provided raw materials. We build a wall, Kael announced, all around the plateau, high enough that no beast can jump it, strong enough that no beast can break through. A wall of what? Asked Trem, a skilled hunter. Kael picked up a stone, weighed it in his hand. Of this. We stack stones, fit them together, make them solid. That will take forever. Then we'd better start now. The work was back-breaking. Kael had never attempted anything like this. No one had. They were inventing not just a fortress, but the entire concept of permanent construction. The first wall collapsed after 2 days. They'd stacked stones carelessly, without understanding how weight distributed, how gaps weakened everything. The tumbling rocks nearly killed someone. They tried again. This time, Kael insisted they use smaller stones to fill gaps between larger ones. It was more stable, but still not enough. A determined beowulf could probably knock it down. They tried again, and again, and again. Weeks passed. The tribe grew gaunt from hunger hunting, took time away from building, and building took time away from hunting. Some whispered about leaving, about admitting defeat and catching up with Mora's group. But then something remarkable happened. Part 4, The Discovery. It was Lyra, actually, who made the breakthrough. She'd been playing near the stream, never alone, never unwatched, and had made mud pies as children do. When Kael came to fetch her at sunset, he noticed that her mud creations had dried hard in the sun. "Lyra," he said slowly, an idea forming. "Make me the biggest mud pile you can." She giggled and complied, delighted to have her father play with her. Kael watched as she mixed water and clay-rich mud, then shaped it. By the next morning it had dried into a solid mass. "We've been thinking about this wrong," Kael announced to the tribe. "We don't just stack stones, we bind them together." They experimented for days. Clay alone cracked as it dried. Mud alone washed away in rain. But mud mixed with clay, with grass fibres added for strength, pressed between stones and left to dry that held. That bonded the rocks together into something far stronger than the sum of its parts. The wall began to rise in earnest. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't even. It was perhaps 5 feet tall at its lowest point and 7 feet at its highest, but it was solid. When Trem tested it with his shoulder, slamming into it with all his strength, it didn't budge. "It's working," someone whispered, afraid to believe. "It's working," someone else shouted, ready to celebrate. But Kael wasn't satisfied. "It needs to be higher, and we need a way to get in and out without breaking the wall each time." The gate was another innovation born of necessity. They created a gap in the wall on the gentle slope side, then fashioned a barrier of heavy logs bound together, which could be rolled into place at night and rolled away during the day. It wasn't elegant, but it worked. 3 months after Mora's group had left, Kael stood atop his wall and looked out at the darkening grassland. Behind him the tribe's fires burned safely. Children laughed and played. People rested without posting guards at every compass point. That night, for the first time in his life, Kael slept deeply. Part 5. The Test. The great cat came on the next new moon, when darkness was absolute. Kael woke to screaming, not human screaming, but the terrifying roar of a predator accustomed to easy prey, now frustrated by an obstacle it didn't understand. He rushed to the wall and looked down. In the light of hastily lit torches he saw it, the largest cat he'd ever witnessed, rippling muscle and fury hurling itself at the barrier. The wall shook but held. The cat tried to climb, its claws finding no purchase on the packed mud and stone. It circled the perimeter, testing for weakness, finding none. The tribe gathered on the wall, watching in amazement as the great cat prowled outside. They were separated from death by 5 feet of rock and mud. It seemed impossible. It seemed like magic. "We could kill it," Trem said quietly, hefting a spear. Kael considered. They were safe up here. Provoking the cat was risky, but Trem was right. They were safe up here. They had the advantage, perhaps for the first time in human history. "Do it," Kael ordered. Trem threw. His spear caught the cat in the shoulder. It roared, a sound that would have sent them fleeing in terror just months ago. Now they stood their ground. Other spears followed. The cat, wounded and confused, retreated into the night. The tribe erupted in celebration. They had faced a great cat and won. They hadn't run. They hadn't hidden. They had fought from a position of strength. "We should hunt it tomorrow," someone suggested. "Finish it." "No," Kael said firmly. "We've proven the fortress works. That's enough. We don't need to be reckless." But the confidence that night had kindled couldn't be extinguished. Over the following weeks the tribe transformed. They were no longer wanderers, no longer prey. They were builders, defenders, settlers. They expanded the wall, making it higher and stronger. They built permanent shelters within the fortress, simple at first, just frames of wood covered with hides, but more sophisticated than any mobile camp. They dug a well inside the wall, ensuring water access even during siege. They invented doors. They invented windows. They invented the concept of inside and outside. Other innovations followed rapidly. With a permanent base, they could store food for lean times. They could work hides more carefully, making better clothing. They could create tools too heavy or delicate to carry on endless migrations. Children born in the fortress had never known the terror of constant flight. They played without fear, grew strong and healthy, asked questions their parents had never had time to consider. Why is the sky blue? What makes the seasons change? What lies beyond the mountains? Questions that required thought, not just survival instinct. Part 6. The Return. 7 months after the split, scouts brought news. Mora's group was approaching. Kael watched from his wall as they emerged from the grassland. They numbered only 8 now. 7 had been lost to predators, illness, and exhaustion. Those who remained looked haunted, skeletal, desperate. Mora stopped at the base of the wall, staring up at it in disbelief. "Kael," she called, her voice cracking. "It's real. I thought the scouts were lying or mad, but it's real." "It's real," Kael confirmed. "Come inside, you're safe here." The log gate rolled aside. Mora's group entered, moving like people in a dream. They touched the wall, marvelling at its solidity. They stared at the permanent structures, the laughing children, the stored food, the people who looked well fed and rested. "We were wrong," Mora said simply. "I was wrong. I'm sorry." "You're here now," Kael replied. "That's what matters." But Mora's arrival brought news as well as remorse. "Other tribes have heard rumours," she explained. "Whispers of people who stopped running, who built something permanent. Some think it's myth. Others are desperate enough to believe." "They should come," Kael said immediately. "We'll show them how to build their own fortresses. Everyone deserves to be free from fear." "Some won't want to learn," Mora warned. "Some will want to take what you've built." Kael looked at his wall, his fortress, his home. He looked at Lyra, now playing with other children, not cowering in terror as night approached. "Then we'll defend it," he said quietly. "We know how to build walls. We'll learn how to defend them." Part 7. The legacy years passed. The first fortress became a village, then a town. Other fortresses rose across the grasslands as Kael shared his knowledge freely. Some succeeded, some failed, some were attacked by jealous tribes and destroyed, others prospered and grew. Kael grew old within his stone walls, his hair greyed, his body bent. But he lived to see his grandchildren born in safety, to see Lyra grow into a skilled builder herself, improving on his crude designs. On his last day, weak with age but clear-minded, Kael asked to be carried to the top of the wall one final time. From there, he could see a dozen other fortresses on the horizon, smoke rising from their cooking fires, banners fluttering in the breeze. "Do you remember when we were always running?" Lyra asked, sitting beside him, her hand in his as it had been all those years ago. "I remember," Kael said. "I remember being afraid every moment of every day. I remember thinking that was just how life was, how it would always be. And now?" Kael smiled. "Now people have choices. They can wander if they wish, or settle if they prefer. They can run from danger, or face it from behind strong walls. We're still prey sometimes, but we're also predators. We're also builders. We're also dreamers." "What was the hardest part?" Lyra asked. "Building the first wall? Convincing people to stay?" "Fighting off the great cat," Kael considered. "The hardest part was imagining that anything could be different. Everything that came after the work, the setbacks, the doubts, all of that was easier than taking that first step into the unknown, easier than believing change was possible." As the sun set, painting the walls of humanity's first fortress in shades of gold, Kael closed his eyes for the last time. He died surrounded by stone and loved ones, not running through darkness, not fleeing in terror, not wondering if tonight would be his last. He died having changed everything. Epilogue. The first fortress. Today, archaeologists debate the location of humanity's first permanent settlement. They argue about dates and evidence, analyze pottery shards and post holes, construct theories about the transition from nomadic to sedentary life. But somewhere, buried under millennia of wind and dust, lie the remains of a rough stone wall, 5 feet tall at its lowest point, 7 at its highest, bound with mud and clay and grass, built by desperate hands that refuse to keep running. The name of its builder is lost to history. We don't know what he called himself or what his daughter's name was, or how he convinced others to try something impossible, but we know he existed. We know that someone, somewhere, sometime, looked at a world of endless predation and said, "No more." That person was the first fortress builder, the first human to understand that we didn't have to accept the world as it was. We could change it. We could build. We could create safety where none existed. Every wall that has ever been built, every castle and fort and city and home, traces its lineage back to that first crude barrier of stone and mud. Every time we close a door at night, feeling safe in our homes, we're benefiting from that one person's revolutionary act. The first fortress didn't just protect its inhabitants from predators. It protected humanity's future, giving us space to develop, to think, to grow into something more than prey. And it all started because one person, one ordinary human being refused to keep running. Would you like this story to focus more on technical building details, or perhaps emphasize different aspects of the narrative?